This is my pre-lesson vlog. This is before I'm going to teach the lesson today that I've outlined in my project. This is the day 2 lesson. If I had more time with this class, I would be able to go through the whole week with them, but today's lesson is a condense of the week plan. I'm going to be doing a partial novel study with them. I've outlined a chapter that I want to read with them that connects back to my topic of magical realism. I'm feeling a little bit nervous about my lesson. I just hope that they like the material that I bring to them and that they want to engage with it. I hope that my authority in the lesson is like strong enough to convey their attention, but I hope I also stay true to resisting the mode of authority that I don't agree with from Paulo Freire, the one that the teacher teaches and the students absorb the teaching. I want to bring them material that I think is interesting and see if they engage with it with the same interest and hopefully an open mind. But who knows what type of day it's gonna be. I can't predict that. All I can do is hope for the best. I just got to the classroom that I am teaching my lesson in. I prepared the board with my opening question, which is, what are the differences between fantasy and reality? I plan on giving them a couple minutes to discuss with their table mates what they think that may be, and then we're gonna make a word web with those connections, and we'll see how it goes from there. I just finished teaching my lesson to the grade 8 class. Unfortunately, I was not able to film the lesson because I didn't have anybody to film it for me, and I didn't really have the technological resources to do so because my phone was inadequate and the room was kind of awkward to film. So I'll just give you a video log of my experience teaching. The class that I work with, they already know me. I've been coming in for a couple months now, so they're comfortable with me. The teacher just introduced me to them, introduced the fact that I'm teaching the lesson today, and just let me take over. So I started the class by asking them the question, what is the difference between reality and fantasy? And I gave them a couple minutes to discuss with their neighbors what that meant to them. I walked around and listened, just in the way that we do in Education 240 in lecture. When a question's asked, we get some time to talk about it with our neighbors. So that's what I did. After I gave them some time to focus on the question, then we came back as a class to answer it. And I kind of just asked for like 1 or 2 words to describe the difference between the topics. So, for example, we started with fantasy, and words that define fantasy were fiction, make-believe, fake, impossible, a lot of these kind of words that they come up with. And then we went into talking about reality, what makes reality, and the words like real and believable, like facts, news, those kind of words. One interesting conversation I had was when one student said that they would define reality as real. So then I asked them the question, what would you consider to be real? How do we define real? And it took them a minute to think of their answer. I did not give my opinion. I let him completely to say what he wanted to say, and he came up with a really insightful answer. And then I also posed the question, is fantasy completely fake? And we had a really good dialogue between us, and I really enjoyed his answer and the thoughtfulness in his response. So after we did these word webs of fantasy and reality, I brought forth the idea to bridge like the gap. Like I asked the class, I said, so if we see the differences between fantasy and reality, then what would the bridge between them be? None of them came up with a response for that, because that is a very hard question to answer, especially when you don't have too much time to think about it. And I had just asked them what were the differences. I didn't ask them what was the same between them. So by me asking them what was the same, or like what's the connection between them, it was a little bit loaded, but I wanted to point them in the direction of magical realism. And then from there, I went on to define what magical realism was for them, so they had a working definition for it. And then after I defined magical realism, I held for questions. I didn't receive any questions, so we moved forward onto the reading, and we spent about 15 minutes reading a short passage from the novel Exit West. And during the reading of the story, I paused a couple times to ask if anybody had questions. A couple times they did, so I clarified the situations within the story. The story is rich in text, and it is quite advanced for the grade 8 level, so I understand if they didn't understand what I was completely saying, but we took the time to I took the time to explain to them what the words or the troubling sentences were to them. We kept going. We read the passage where magical realism is deployed the first time in the story. It was quite confusing for some of them because the language that was used, and the author tends to go on tangents and uses very long sentences and very sophisticated words that they're not used to seeing, and it was completely challenging because they're at the grade 8 level, and this is a book I read in a first-year university, so there is quite the discrepancy in the level of the literature. But this class is called the peak class, so they are supposed to be pushed to the limits, and I felt that I did that with them today. After teaching them the lesson, I handed out my assignment, which was the story, and we had about 15 minutes for me to go around to everybody and personally ask them if they had questions, and a couple of them were very confused, which is very understandable. And so I went through it with them one-on-one, gave them the time that they needed to understand what I'm asking from them, and a lot of them are very excited to write this short story. They are very excited to exercise their creative writing skill, and I am very excited to read their story. In regards to how it went today, I did go in with a lot of nerves, anxiety, but once it started, that kind of just all flushed away, and I felt really good about it. There were a couple moments when the class got rowdy, and I had to try and reel them in. That's something I need to work on with my class in the future. I'm gonna have to deploy a way for me to be able to gauge their attention. So we'll see how that goes, because I am rather soft-spoken, but I really try to project. So my nerves slipped away once I started. I felt confident about the way I was presenting the material. I felt confident about the plan I had going in. Some questions were challenging, and I understand that some of the students didn't know what I was talking about, but we worked through it together, and I felt that I learned from them because I learned the things that I have to improve being a teacher, and I felt that they learned from me. Coming up on the screen now are some images of the cover pages that the students did for their stories. I think they're all so creative and wonderful. They give a glimpse of the student as an author, an artist, and just as a creative being. They are so personal, and I was so pleased with all of them.